Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Barry Smith.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I'm with Barry Smith, and man, I'm ready to play some tennis. What do you think?
Great sport. Played it when I was younger. Can't say I play a whole lot now, but definitely admired the sport, man. A lot of great memories. A lot of great athletes have come out of that world and still do. But yeah, man, tennis is cool. I'm okay saying that.
Yeah, we've had some great sports that we've covered. A lot of football, some basketball, but this is our first foray, and we've done some track and field. This is our first foray into tennis.
Oh.
So we're going to unpack some stories here. And I was inspired by a movie a few years ago, and I know you were too, King Richard. And why don't you just tee it up? Tell folks what King Richard's all about, because when I first heard the title, I thought, King Richard, I don't really want to watch a medieval English king movie. Like, no, that's not what it's all about. It's about something else. And tell everybody what that was all about.
Yeah, so I think probably, well, unless you're a tennis star or a tennis fan or a Will Smith fan, you might still be trying to figure out King Richard. But how about if I let this out a little bit?
Yeah.
Venus and Serena Williams. Oh, okay. Now I get it.
Yeah.
Dear old dad, Richard Williams. And he was quite the character played by Will Smith in the movie. But I think, you brought this up. I think it's a great addition to our little sports marathon here that we've been doing. Just the fact that two girls close in age, African-American, obviously females, right? And just what's transpired in the last, 3-4 decades with, and I'll say this like this, so much equality we've gained and so much still to go, but we needed these front runners. And they're just such an amazing story here. And not just in what they accomplished individually, but I think what they accomplished together, because that was a big part of the story. And to have a mentor and a coach and their father, who was quite an eccentric guy. There's no doubt about that, but so many, I think, lessons to learn, challenges, opportunities. But I think at the end of the day, you got two ladies here who just refused to give up, believed in themselves early on. I mean, this is, again, a lot of my comments are coming out of, the way the movie portrayed it all, but I also followed them growing up. I did play tennis and I did watch them. And a lot of admiration for what they were able to accomplish, what they were able to do for their sport, what they were able to do for female athletes and women of color. Just incredible what they've been able to accomplish and still do. Truth be told, they're both neighbors of mine. Serena's a little bit up north and Venus is a little bit south.
Wow.
And so not that I get to, interact with them too much, but they're definitely in the news down here in South Florida. And I know they're both very active in serving the community and what they continue to do and just creating, incredible legacies, both in their early 40s. Serena's actually with child again here. She made that announcement a couple months ago, and I know that that family's very excited about bringing another little athlete, I'm sure, into the world. But just what an incredible story. And I know we're going to unpack some of this stuff, but yeah, Serena and Venus Williams, two amazing ladies who have and continue to do incredible work.
So let me ask,
and in their communities.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. I mean, there's been some phenomenal female tennis players in the world. So we're not moving them off the side and saying no, they weren't great. Whether it's Chris Evert or
Billie Jean King. I mean, let's
good ones. Yeah, some great ones. So we're not dissing anybody else. So I'm going to ask you this question. Do you think an athlete is great by nature or by nurture?
Wow. Great question. I think it's absolutely both. By nature, look, DNA is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Both those girls, very fit, very strong. Came a lot of that athletic ability came natural to them.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have that, some don't. Some have coordination, some have strength, some people don't. Some people just aren't cut out for sports. So there's definitely that side of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The nature, but then the nurture. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, look, we're both involved in leadership. We both understand the value of mentorship. You even look at what those two girls went through. Being coached and mentored by their father, who was, look, I mean, some would argue a tennis genius, even though again he was kind of a different kind of character.
Yeah.
He was a mental genius, and he just grew up dealing with racism, Louisiana, rough, fights, violence, all the stuff that we know a lot of folks in that part of the country went through at that time. And yet he was determined. He drew a plan out for those girls,
Mm-hmm.
and he wouldn't let anything get in the way of that. And so whether it was him or their coach or whoever it was along the way, the girls were definitely nurtured, and nurtured in the right way. And but they received it, right? And there's a difference there, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Go back to the nurturing that Richard gave them. He taught them that competitive spirit. He taught them the value of consistency. He taught them the value of doing the right things and staying mentally and physically sharp and all that. Those are the type of things he instilled in them. And he was a great tennis. I mean, he knew the game. There's no doubt about it. And then introduced some more great coaches into their lives. And even though, it kind of got changed up a little bit along the way, due to Richard's outline, this is the way we're going to do it, girls. And he never really deviated from that. But I think to your question, it's definitely both. Now, which is the most important? I think the nurturing is the most important.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of people out there who have the physical skills and gifts to go out and be great athletes. But as we've looked, as we've kind of gone through this list, it takes somebody special to really put it together. And it's not all about the physical skills. It's mental, it's emotional. We talked about Michael Jordan, who's certainly, top of the food chain on physical skills. We also talked about the 80 hockey team.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys were not the best athletes on the planet.
Yeah.
And yet look what they were able to accomplish. So it's definitely both. You gotta have the skills. You gotta have that nature, what nature delivers to us. But then if you really want to be a top achiever, you gotta have the nurturing side of it.
Yeah. And here's the other thing, and I don't know what the word is, right? There's nature, right? So they had the strengths, they had the ability. He saw that, Richard did, and I'm sure others did as well. You have the nurture, and we've talked about that, but there's another element to it where you got everything against you.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Tennis is not a poor man's sport. I mean, okay, you can go down to the local tennis court, and we don't have as many as we used to, but back in the day, you could go down.
Changing them all to pickleball courts now.
It's all pickleball. But I mean, you used to be able to go down to the neighborhood tennis court and you'd play, but nobody ever became a Wimbledon champion by playing at the local neighborhood tennis court. That's not where you got to get trained up. It is all about being nurtured, and that costs money.
Yep.
You got to find a way to do it. He came up with a plan. He saw a different future than everybody else. He had neighbors. This is King Richard, right?
Yep.
Richard. He had neighbors saying, "What are you doing?" Yeah, and other people questioning him. He's like, "Well, wait a minute. I see a different future for him. Why not? Let's give it a shot. We have to make some sacrifices." And they made lots of sacrifices along the way. Law of sacrifice. You see that. You see the law of belief, right? Somebody who believes in you. And here's what's great. These girls had a passion for it, right? I don't know at what point. I don't know if the movie does a good job reflecting it. It's a great movie, by the way. But clearly, they wouldn't be where they are today if they didn't have a passion for the game that they play. And I just think that's so important to have that passion, and vision can be shared. So it wasn't their vision in the crib, right, to be tennis players, but Richard had that vision for them and believed in them and mapped out a plan to kind of make it work. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a breaking average plan, right? I mean, some of the things that they did,
Yes.
some of the things they did were like, no, that's not the conventional way to do it, Richard. You know, you got to go from A to B to C to D. It was like, well, wait a minute. I get that, but what if we go to D?
Yeah. No, and I think that honestly, Paul, I think that's, in my opinion, the greatest gift he gave those girls was that self-confidence and the self-esteem. They started out with nothing, and as the movie portrays it, they're on an old beat up, tennis court, and the first time they bring out Rick Macy to kind of take a look at him, and he's just like looking around, and there's a scene in the movie again. I realize it's some of this is probably made for TV, but a car, local kids rolls up and like, hey, what Richard, what are you doing with that white guy? And I'm sure that might be true because it was just that era, that type of community. And yet Richard's like, no, man, he's with me. It's all good. And that was kind of the beginning of, I think, of him, letting go. It was the first time he really went outside to find somebody else, right, to do that nurturing.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you talk about their passion. Richard gave that gift to them. He I won't use the word convinced. He just showed them, allowed them to go out and do what they did, encouraged them to see that they did have those skills and build that self-confidence. And there's several scenes in the movie where, you see, Venus and a little bit with Serena, but it kind of keyed more on Venus and developing the story. Seeing her in some positions as a 12, 13, 14-year-old girl, just being really self-confident. That came from Richard.
Yeah.
That was something he poured into them. And just to see her make comments like, no, I could beat anybody in the world. I know I can. Now, certainly it didn't happen all at once, but it didn't take long. And, just what an amazing story of what I think. Here's what I think. Venus and Serena did it.
They did it.
They became champions. They became the top of their sport. And it was, I believe, the self-confidence with, Richard initially and continued to pour into them. And what I wonder now is like, those weren't just two great gifted kids, right? It wasn't that simple. There's a lot of great gifted kids out there today. Mm-hmm. So what would be possible really for anybody? And I know we're talking about sports, but this, I think, applies to anything in life. What if more young kids, young people had that type of nurturing? People believe in them, right? Me, building what matters, people. And I think it's just such a gift to believe in someone to that element. Now that we've got grandkids 3 and 1 and starting to watch them grow up, man, I just can't wait to get to a place where I can really start showing them that I believe in them, that they can do anything they want to and they put their mind to, and see what kind of impact I can make. And I think, it doesn't have to be grandkids. It can be a coworker, it can be a sibling, it can be whoever, but just to believe in people. I think that's one of the greatest gifts we can give others.
Amen to that. I think of what you're sharing, like believing in somebody, creating an opportunity. Hey, girls, you're going to compete in some competition here. That first match they were in, and I think one of them was only supposed to compete, but the younger sister ended up playing too, right? And that's because they wanted to. They were hungry for it. And that's probably the word I want to just put in front of everybody today is, what are you hungry for?
Good question.
What are you hungry for? Because if you want to make a difference in this world, you got to get hungry. You got to get hungry.
Yeah.
You know, and do it to the best of your ability, and don't expect you to become the best right away, but just get hungry, keep learning, keep going. Look for others that can support you. Find that coach, find people around you. And I wonder, I asked you this question before we turn on the recording. Could have Serena or Venus ever made it to where they were without each other?
Yeah, I think they both could have been great athletes. They both could have been great tennis players, but I don't think they would have achieved necessarily what they did. Definitely not as fast.
Yeah.
I shared with you that Venus has a quote that the most important role she ever had in her life was as a big sister, and that always came first. And, we hear so many stories about sibling rivalry and, all these things that happen, but man, they just, they were back then very close. They continue to be. I mean, they live like 10 miles apart from each other now, and they do a lot of things together. Even though they've got, outside of tennis, different missions, different interests, different, and yet still very close, and it's just a bond, I think, that was created. And again, environment, right? We can't get through a podcast without talking about environment.
Yeah.
Look at the environment that Richard created for them growing up, and there's even some scenes in the movie where he looks at Serena and he says, yes, I know it's kind of all about Venus right now, but your day's coming. And then one of the closing scenes is like, you're going to be the greatest. I think it was after when Venus played her first match as a pro and ended up losing to Sanchez Vicario, and yet Serena was there watching too, and Richard looks at her and says, "You're going to be the greatest. Your day is coming." And he really did see a timeline, law of timing, right?
Yep.
To your point about, being hungry, one of our mentors, Paul Martinelli, one of the things he's taught me, one of his probably favorite quotes that I have from him: "You get what you fight for."
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, again, Richard gave them the confidence to know what they want to fight for, and gave them the permission, right? The permission to fight for it, kind of in his guidelines. He's watching, he was making sure they didn't go outside of the plan.
Yeah.
He gave him that freedom to own it. Do you want to be a champion? Do you want to go out there and win? And, he left that part of it up to them. And certainly they answered that question. But yeah, I mean, what a phenomenal job, and I know there's been times when they probably both questioned him a little bit as their dad, and certainly, other people have as well. I mean, different character, but at the end of the day, he built two strong girls, mentally, physically, emotionally.
Yeah.
And they've been through a lot, injuries, illnesses. They lost their sister.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people realize that, one of the half sisters that their mom brought to the family was actually killed back in Compton, shot, and so the family had to go through that. It's just
lots of challenges, lots of challenges. What's interesting is when I watch the movie, and maybe people get a sense of this, like King Richard, boy, he's a control freak. But as it goes on, you realize, no, I was wrong. Yes, he probably wanted control, but he gave up some of that control too, right? He had to relinquish a bit of it, even though there are a few moments. There are more than a few moments where you realize, oh, you're going to mess this thing up for your girls. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, he relinquished a little bit of that control. But the control he was really trying to transition the control back to them.
Yeah.
And that's the key, right? When they were ready, the control went back to Venus and Serena. And I just love that dynamic. There's some, like you said, there's some great quotes. The Venus quotes, I'll share just a couple real quick. There's this one right here really got me. Life's a challenge, but that's the best part.
Yeah.
Right? Life's a challenge, but that's the best part. If we, how cool would it be to be able to just face life and see the challenge? Like, okay, there's a challenge right here, and embrace it. Just like, all right, I was made for this moment. I can take it on. I'm ready. That's the best part.
There's a great section in the movie, and again, I don't know how much of it was, created for the movie or how it really happened, but some great dialogue between Richard and his wife, the girl's mom. When everybody's begging him, Richard, Venus is ready, let her play, and the mom, just like, Richard, what are you doing? Are you just going to squash this now? Everything you've built these girls up for, everything you've done to get them prepared for the moment. And when are you going to, Richard, all through the movie, he's like, I'll know when they're ready. I'll know when they're ready. I'll know when they're ready. And yet he keeps waiting. And finally, it took the wife. Always takes the smart woman to get involved and straighten us guys out, right?
Yep.
And she just said, Richard, you got to get out of the way, man. It's time for our daughter. Yep. Let her be who she is. You've done your job.
Yes.
And it was like,
you've prepared them.
To me, a very meaningful part of the movie and the story. And Venus goes out there and I won't spoil, I'll just say, don't expect, if you haven't seen the movie, don't go, expecting to see the whole career of Venus and Serena, because that's not what it's about. It's really about, what built them into who they were to become. Right. And then I think most of us kind of realize, if you're a sports fan at all, we know the rest of the story, right? But it was everything that happened up until that point. Just again, phenomenal job by Will Smith and the writers and just everyone that was involved to bring this story out. And great job, ladies. I mean, wow.
Yeah. And here they are, right? They're not done with life, right?
Not at all.
And that's what's cool is, we graduate from one stage of our life, and then we step into the next stage of our life. And then I'm going to be curious to see how these two moms now, as they groom and nurture their children, and certainly they've done well. They've all, I don't know how much money they've made. 96 million is one of those quotes. A few dollars. They're okay financially.
Yeah.
And look how far they've come. They weren't born into that money. They were not born into that money. They worked hard for it, and it didn't come overnight. And I love what you talked about when you shared Paul Martinelli's quote, and one of her quotes. This is Venus. She shares that one who is persistent will excel. Persistence. Just maintain that. That's perseverance. This is, again, hungry. How hungry are you? So many great quotes. I mean, you could take both of them and just like, wow, maybe even Richard as well, take some of their quotes. And there's a lot of leadership nuggets out of that. A lot of them. You could probably pull from some of their other coaches too.
No, and I'll throw one in. We can't let Venus have all the credit here, so I'll pull one in from Serena.
Yeah,
this is great, and I think everybody realizes the supply is way outside of just women. But check this out: that Serena said, the success of every woman should be the inspiration to another. We should raise each other up. Make sure you're very courageous, be strong, be extremely kind, and above all, be humble. Now, substitute the word woman in that quote, which I don't want to minimize it at all, but just substitute the word woman in that quote and plug in anything. Yeah. The success of every woman should be the inspiration to another. We should raise each other up. Make sure you are very courageous, be strong, be extremely kind, and above all, be humble. Man, that's just a quote for ages. For any athlete.
It is so good. There's so many great stuff. You wonder where some of this came from, her mom or, or her dad, some of these thoughts. So many good ones.
It was, I can only imagine, a household of 5 girls, plus extended family. And yet they did it, just to, I mean, give credit where credit's due, right? Great job of parenting, turned out some great kids. I'm sure like any family had some challenges in there. But to me, that self-confidence, the self-esteem, the believing in your kids or anybody, man, that to me is just my takeaway of what those two ladies bring to any situation, anything they're involved in, is that idea of being confident, and what better place for that than African American women, you know, anybody who's been oppressed or has not been given equal time, equal rights. Whatever. I mean, that.
Yeah.
Here you and I are, the quintessential guys who had it easy, and I won't argue that a bit. We need more Venus and Serena Williams out there.
Yeah, we do. And I love how they pushed each other. And I love how you and I we push each other in a good way, right? We kind of like, and I need that. And here's a quote that kind of ties to it. I want you to help me break it down a little bit. So this is Serena, and she shares that Venus told me the other day that champions don't get nervous in tight situations. And she has this, that really helped me a lot. I decided I shouldn't get nervous and just do the best I can. And I kind of wrestle with that, like, well, I get nervous. We all get nervous. And then I started thinking about it, Barry, and I realized that when do I get nervous? When does any athlete or any leader or any person get really nervous? They get nervous when they're thinking about it right before they take action. The nervousness happens before the action's taken. And so if we sit there and we ponder too long, we could worry ourselves to not take action, right? We could get so nervous about it. It doesn't mean that the nerves go away. I think you step forward because of the nerves. It's like a trigger. Step forward. And, you see this in football. You and I watch a lot. It doesn't matter what sport it is. You see players who they're nervous before the game. I went to a Boston Celtics game last year. It was amazing. Floor court watching this game. And you could see these players are a little nervous. But once the whistle blew and the crowd's getting into it, all the nervousness is gone. And, as the game is flowing, the signs of all that, the nerves beforehand, they're gone. And I'm like, that's pretty powerful. So that's just kind of my take on this thing. And it made me realize Venus's quote that she shared with Serena, nervous, don't get nervous in tight situations, meaning it's a choice. It's a choice to be worried, to have anxiety, to have all of that. We could be worried and could have anxiety, but we could choose not to worry or have anxiety. How? By just taking action. So just your thoughts on that. I just wanted to.
I love this topic. I was just listening patiently and attentively as you were kind of going through that.
Yeah.
But to me, all right, this is not much different than the speaking lane. All right.
Yeah.
And you and I have been hearing this for years, right? On how to improve on our speaking skills. And I just had this conversation just this last weekend on a mentoring call with some folks from the John Maxwell community. And we're talking about, here's the deal. And I think this is where that quote came from. And I really think this is where the power of reducing or eliminating that anxiety comes from. Where is that focus? The focus when we're talking about being nervous or anxious, we're focused on what? We're focused on ourselves, right? And so that's where that comes from. And was that Venus quote or Serena quote? Venus quote, right?
Serena's saying that this is what Venus told me.
Yeah, right. So Venus, and I think this is just, again, to Richard's credit on the mindset he raised them with. Don't get nervous. Don't get anxious. You know what to do. You focused on yourself, or you focused on your cause? Because they even position it in the movie where there's a line in there, there's some dialogue between Venus and Richard. And he says, you're not just doing this for you. You're not just doing this for us. You're doing this for every little Black girl in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Yeah.
so in that moment, he said, Venus, get the focus off yourself and get it on the cause. Focus on the cause, focus on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And I think we can, that again, that's a lesson, right? It's a life lesson. It's not just about tennis. It's about everything we do. When we're really focused on, and when we get nervous or anxious, we're focused on ourselves. Are we fail? Are we going to fail? Are we going to say the wrong thing? Are we going to go too long? Are we going to go not long enough? What are we going to say something wrong? All that is focusing on ourselves. And so we can truly focus on the cause, on the people we're serving, from the, speaking stage, right? That's who we're supposed to be focusing on, the message we're delivering, the people we're serving. And when we shift our focus to that, I'm not saying it happens right away or it completely goes away, but when we really truly focus on the cause or the people we're serving, that anxiety, that stress, those kind of things definitely decrease. And I think over time they go away.
Yeah.
John Maxwell talked about this. He just did, I've been kind of plugged into a book study he did on his new 16 indispensable laws of communication, and talking about the same thing, that it's a focus on the people. It's a focus, it's certainly he's spoken 15,000 times, so he's had a little bit of practice, right?
Yeah.
But he still talks about, making that connection with the audience, serving them, and how, you step out from, the green room and just kind of read the crowd and meet the people. And he's, you and I have watched him do it dozens, if not hundreds of times, walking slowly through the crowd.
That's right.
Being dialed in and focused on the people he's serving. So these are all, little tips and tools that we can incorporate into our daily life of being, spouses, fathers, co-workers, leaders in a lot of different ways. These are things we can do to, to be people of greater impact and influence.
Yeah. There's something special about the game itself, tennis, right? You think about what it's all about, right? Think about this, right? So there's the attack part, right? You get to serve, you're serving, and you're delivering the ball. Think about that word serving, you're serving. And how interesting is it to take that idea of service and realize I can make an impact by serving. I can make an impact by serving. And then knowing that, some things are going to come, they're not going to be fun. You're going to have to scramble and get to it. You got to bring the ball back. You got to serve it back. And so it's this game of serving. And the person who serves the best wins every time. And I'm like, well, isn't that true of life? Like, if we want to excel at what we do, don't we need to serve well? I mean, seriously. And I know it's a metaphor and maybe a little cheesy to some people, but it's so true. And I just came across, as we're preparing for this, I came across this quote. And I'm like, oh, dang, this is so good. I'm going to leave this towards the end. This is right before the tip and challenge I want to give everybody. But Serena says, once I serve well, my whole game goes up. Isn't that true for all of us, man? Once I serve well, my whole game goes up. Man, just write that down, put it in your mirror, put it somewhere where you see it every day.
What just struck me when you said that? I never thought about it this way. Mm-hmm. But in the game of tennis, all right, if you're not familiar in the game of tennis, the psychology and dynamic of the game is when you're serving, right? They alternate who serves. You're kind of in control, right? Yeah. That's usually typically the way we see the game go. When you're serving, you're in control. And as you were just sharing that, I thought, wait a minute. So when we're serving, we're in control? Because we usually think about that serving as like a subordinate position.
Yeah.
And isn't that interesting that in the game of tennis and maybe in the game of life, friends.
Yeah.
When we're serving, we're in control.
It's amazing. It's
I
amazing.
like that. I like that.
I'm telling you guys, we can use this everywhere, any place, anytime, all day long. And, find those strengths, find your passion, but nurture those things. Okay. Venus, Serena, they were great, but they were nurtured there. They grew into it. They kept going, persevere. So I'm kind of getting my tip and challenge. That's my tip and challenge is, hey, look, nobody knew how to serve a tennis ball, right? As a kid, right? No, Tom Brady wasn't the best when he got drafted. He was pick 199. Okay. We could talk about anybody. Nobody was great at first. Nobody was. Just keep going, keep doing it, but do this. Learn to serve. And that'll make an impact. So, what's your tip and challenge?
Oh, so many to choose from here. My challenge is easy, but I think my tip, look, the opportunities are there. All right. The opportunities are there that you're not seeing to encourage.
Yeah.
All right. You look at what Richard did for Venus and what Venus did for Serena and what the two of them have done for millions, right? Believed in them, encouraged them. And my tip is, hey, open your eyes, folks. Increase your level of awareness right now, because those opportunities to do that are out there. And that just rolls right into my challenge, and I know this, I kind of have a common theme, right? It's something like building what matters, people.
Mm-hmm.
People are starving, people are starving for someone to believe in them, to encourage them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately anymore, that's the exception, not the rule. And so my challenge is go out, find that somebody, take something, find somebody, that it won't be awkward for you to encourage or believe in them, but pour into them.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to become part of your legacy. Good grief. Wouldn't you like Venus and Serena Williams as part of your legacy? I'm sure Richard does. And I know he's been dealing with some health issues here last couple of years, but man, what's cool is whatever Venus and Serena continue to build as their legacy will be part of Richard's.
Yeah.
And he was, it sounds like, if you know anything about his history and what his life was like as a kid, it's a brand new legacy getting started with him and his girls. So just go out, think about your legacy. Who can you encourage? Who can you pour into? There's so much unrealized potential out there, and maybe you could be the one to be the difference maker, to get someone a little closer to the potential they have. Wow. Don't take that away from somebody. Don't take that away from somebody.
Yep.
That's your role as a leader.
So good. I love that. I wrote down here, Barry, I said, this is a question for all of us. How can I best serve? Richard probably, at some point he asked that question. How can I best serve my family? How can I best serve? Right?
He came up with his plan. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, come on, plan.
It worked out pretty good.
And I put right next to that, I put the word legacy, and I put a square around that. Like, you know what? If you want to increase that legacy, if you want to make an impact, if you want that legacy, learn to serve. Learn to serve.
Bingo.
And serve well, man. Make that impact.
Serve well, and you'll win the match.
You'll win the match. Well, Barry, this has been fun once again. I'm loving the sports stuff that we do. We took a little break with Mark Batterson that we just did recently, and now we're kind of finishing up our sports stuff, and we've got some good ones.
Got some good ones.
Some good ones coming. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching the Breaking Average podcast, and check us out on breakingaverage.com.
There you go.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. This show was produced by R Squared Multimedia. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.
All right, that was great. What'd you think?
Dude, we're just. Oh, see, we got a spectator in the cheap seats, and she thought it was.
All right.
good.
Hey, Cheryl. How you doing?
I took my earbuds out on my music and I was listening going, oh my God.
We got a first fan.
Cool. All right, we got a first listener for this one.
Oh.
So that's cool. So you're saying that Venus is north of you and Serena is south?
Yeah, Venus is actually somewhere up near, or Serena's somewhere up near Paul, somewhere up in that area, and I think Venus has a place right down in Palm Beach on the Intercoastal or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean they basically they came out to West Palm when they started working with Macy.
Yeah.
And
Do
then they
you
and then
bump
they
into
got-
celebs all the time?
Oh, no. I know they're close, but no, because we don't really go down into West Palm, even though it's just a few miles away.